Let's see who you really are, Burntrap. What? It's the Mimic?
Are you seriously all surprised? I mean, I thought it was pretty obvious back when...
What? Do you have something to add, Clown Snorf? Come on, everybody.
Clown Snorf, Clown Snorf, Clown Snorf, Clown Snorf, Clown Snorf.
Hey all, it's your favorite literary expert back again for another video on Freddy Five Night. Rather than doing an analysis video, I want to do a quick video covering my answer to the question of whether or not Burntrap and the Mimic are the same. I know I have a track record of having more thought-provoking, in-depth videos, but this one's a little more loose, as I'm trying to take it easy compared to the monster that was last week's video. The stuff I say in this video will likely be a lot of arguments you've already heard, but I do think I have found one piece of evidence I've seen no one else talk about yet. Plus, I wanted to highlight a discovery made by someone else that I'm not sure a lot of people know about. So with all that out of the way, let me dig into the problem this video is about. Is Burntrap really just the Mimic in disguise?
But Brentsnorf, the answer to this question is obvious.
Just let me have this. I can't fathom why, but it seems that with every issue in the new era of FNaF, there's a whole wave of people who shut down discussions by claiming there is no problem. People just overcomplicate things. But this channel is for talking about FNaF, goddammit. And with God as my witness, Freddy Fazbear will continue to be discussed here. With all that aside, let me introduce those unfamiliar with the dilemma in this case. To quickly summarize, in one of the endings of Security Breach, we find ourselves diving into the depths of the Pizzaplex, only to uncover the remains of the FNaF 6 building, and the two monsters that live inside. One of them is known as the Blob, or the Tangle, and the other has been dubbed Burntrap, given it's very clearly supposed to be some iteration of William Afton. Anyways, while that's all fine and dandy, a problem arose when the Ruin DLC came out over the summer. By and large, all signs pointed to the canon ending of Security Breach actually being the Princess Quest ending, where Vanessa was freed from the clutches of Glitchtrap by Gregory playing through all the Princess Quest games. Yes, I understand people are still debating whether or not Princess Quest is actually canon, but for the sake of time, this theory is going with the assumption that it is. An interesting dilemma has arisen with Ruin, however. Nearing the end of the game, you can stumble upon a comic that replicates the Burntrap ending of Security Breach, fitting it in with the other supposed non-canon endings. However, people notice an issue. While at first glance, the fact that the Burntrap ending is supposedly fake may lead you to believe that Burntrap simply never existed, it isn't that simple. At the beginning of Ruin, there's a blink and you'll miss it moment where the Tangle peeks its head into the building before quickly slithering away. This, of course, puts people in the predicament of knowing that even if the Burntrap ending wasn't canon, the Tangle still is, and from that fact we can deduce that Burntrap may very well still be real as well. So from here, the debate broke off into two paths. One states that Burntrap is simply another one of the Mimic's costumes. The other says that the Mimic and Burntrap are their own distinct beings, and the only reason we don't see Burntrap in Ruin is because the Blob took him away as it fled the building. The biggest reason as to why people are skeptical about the Mimic and Burntrap being the same is the fact that clearly their endoskeletons don't match. But what if I told you that the Mimic is a shapeshifter? This is a little bit of intel from the Tales books, but it's described that the Mimic can change size, fit into pretty much any costume it wants, and it even augments itself with extra limbs at one point. The other counter I'd make to this counter argument is look at the Mimic's design as it is. This thing is terribly asymmetrical, almost looking as if it has swapped out its parts over time from parts from other robots, including the left hand of our friend Burntrap. Speaking of Burntrap, there's another question I should answer first. If this really is just the Mimic in a suit, how did it actually get in there when it's very clearly already occupied? Well, fear not, my friends. In the books, there's a scene where someone puts a costume on and the Mimic promptly forces itself into the suit with the person inside, presumably killing them instantly. That's actually kind of disturbing. Another interesting detail in the books is that the Mimic tends to hold its arm out in a particular pose, mimicking that of a child holding a plush toy. Of course, at the beginning of the Burntrap boss fight, we see Burntrap standing in pretty much that exact pose. Backing up a bit, I wanted to bring up something Rytoast mentioned in his video on the subject, namely the idea that Gregory only learned what Burntrap and the Blob were based on Vanessa's account of witnessing the two of them. If true, this would then seem to show that Burntrap can't be the Mimic, as Gregory says later in Ruin that he doesn't know what the Mimic is. To elaborate, the issue Rai's meaning by calling this possibility out is if the implication is that Vanessa could recall her time being under Glitchtrap's control, and that led led to Gregory's drawing, she should have also forwarded information to him on what Burntrap actually is. If that's the case, yet he claims he doesn't know what the Mimic is in Ruin, that may imply they're two separate beings. Problem is though, I think it's not only possible, but furthermore very likely, that Gregory made this drawing after seeing Burntrap and the Blob with his own eyes. There's a part in Ruin where, while talking to Cassie, the Mimic says that the reason everything is so destroyed and why it's trapped is because something burrowed out of the Pizzaplex and ruined everything. Of course, the implication here is that the Blob burrowed out. Later in Ruin, we presumably even crawl through the tunnel it dug to escape shortly before we reach the Mimic. All of this in mind, I'd like to turn our attention to the detail of Gregory's backpack. From its positioning, it looks like he crawled through this vent to escape the room the Mimic was eventually trapped in. It's possible Vanessa and Gregory tag teamed it where Gregory was tasked with throwing the Mimic into the room as Vanessa poured concrete over the doorway. I don't know, maybe he tried to loop it or something. Given the straps are facing the vent and not away from the vent, seems to tell me that he crawled through the vent after taking the backpack off, and for whatever reason when he was coming back out, he didn't have time to grab it again. Though looking at the vent itself, it looks kind of destroyed, like it caved in at some point. From this, I personally feel this may show that the Blob didn't escape until after Gregory and Vanessa had already sealed up the Mimic. I mean, Gregory has completely left his backpack behind, seemingly implying at the time it was a close call, and he and Vanessa had to quickly escape. My best guess is, while the Mimic was unable to crawl through the vent, it was still sticking its hand through to try to grab at them. Remember, the Mimic's arms can just kind of grow, but that isn't totally implausible. In other words, I feel that the vent being broken and filled with dirt isn't the fault of Gregory and Vanessa. Chances are it was the result of the building caving in more as the Tangle escaped. Now with that established, that does beg the question of who left this light post at the end of the Tangle's tunnel? Well, keep in mind, throughout Ruin, there's indications that some attempts were made to refurbish the building. It's very possible that this was a light put up by someone working to clean up the Pizzaplex, namely the space on the sinkhole, before the project was promptly abandoned. Just to cover my bases, if Gregory and Vanessa did show up before the Tangle ruined everything, they probably just went in the same way that you would in the base game of Security Breach. So in other words, our timeline here would be that Gregory frees Vanessa and they both escape, before returning to seal up the Mimic. Afterwards, the Blob escapes, destroying the Pizzaplex even more, before Fazbear Entertainment briefly attempts to salvage what they can, and then presumably abandoning the idea. I don't know, maybe they ran out of money. That could actually be the purpose of Help Wanted 2, raising money to rebuild the Pizzaplex. Another point of evidence I want to give in the regard of the Mimic being Burntrap is actually something I saw from Entom on Twitter. During the cutscene where it's revealed that the Mimic is in fact not Gregory, a purple light spawns in, before being removed when the cutscene ends. Of course, the same choice of purple lighting was used in the base game, during the cutscene where Burntrap is revealed, so take that for what you will. Finally, I wanted to bring up another perspective Rytoast had on the subject, and a piece of evidence I haven't seen anyone bring up yet. To begin with what Rai points out, he mentions the fact that Burntrap's eyes are distinctly black with purple pinpricks of light as pupils. This is very different from the Mimic, who has wide, glowing eyes, which I feel is a fair enough point to make. But here's where I uncovered my more interesting piece of evidence. In the Burntrap ending cutscene, and in Gregory's drawing, not only does Burntrap have those dark glowing pinprick eyes, but the Tangle seems to as well. Even earlier in the game when it seems to be sleeping, and when it jump scares you, it has those red dots of pupils. This interested me. It's hard to see in Ruin since it runs away so fast, but looking at footage from people who have used cheats to look more closely at this thing, you may now notice what I noticed as well. From the looks of things, its eyes are still dark, but it doesn't seem to have those red laser looking pupils. I must confess, after the response to last week's video, I'm a little hesitant to make any claims like this. I'm sure there's an argument to be had that maybe the missing red dots aren't important, or that Steel Wool simply forgot to add them, but even still, it gave me the idea that maybe Gregory's drawings simply aren't accurate. Maybe the glowing dots of pupils he had in his comic were simply added for dramatic effect, or maybe he simply misremembered what the eyes looked like. Even that aside, you could make a case that perhaps, as a way to complete the fit, the Mimic swapped out its eyes as well when slipping into the Burntrap suit. But I really feel the detail of the Blob's eyes also being different is nothing to gloss over. To conclude, I think that Burntrap was supposed to be the Mimic all along. To help those more unfamiliar with the issue, I'll throw some of the other pieces of evidence I didn't mention on the screen. I also wanted to add that although this isn't evidence per se, I do feel it's relevant to ask, if the Mimic and Burntrap are separate beings, is there really room for Burntrap in the story being told? I mean, he isn't really mentioned in the books at all, and plus having two active villains, not even counting the Tangle, may just complicate the story. Plus, it's heavily implied that from the beginning Glitchtrap was supposed to be Mimic 01 and not actually Afton, so I don't really know what's going on there. Just a thought to leave you off on. I'd love to hear your ideas on how that may work out. Another idea I just wanted to touch on while I have the chance is more minor, but is just an observation I made. Some people seem to be under the impression that just as the Pizzaplex was built on top of the FNaF 6 building, the FNaF 6 building was built on top of something else. But if you look at this building as it's presented to us both in Security Breach and Ruin, it becomes clear that the FNaF 6 building is just a lot bigger than people tend to think. Sure, in the base game there's a huge gap between the pizzeria and the Burntrap area, but this gap is seemingly filled in Ruin, as we have to walk down a couple sets of stairs from the wooden storage area to actually get to this point. Perhaps these metal doors we see around the pizzeria and Security Breach are actually just doors leading to the storage area. And speaking of, I feel that's all these wooded areas are. Recall that in Pizza Sim, just because you bought something doesn't mean they have to place it in your pizzeria. And I feel that's exactly why we find Candy Cadet back here, and not the main pizzeria. This is the unseen storage of the Pizza Sim building. Canonically, Mike had left Candy Cadet in storage by the time Henry's plan unfolded. These wooded areas could also very well be where the animatronic salvages took place. Hell, maybe it's even possible that that's why the Mimic and its costumes are down here in the first place. Some people suggest that the Mimic's costumes were the temporary costumes given to employees during the Springlock recall, and I'm inclined to agree. Maybe to cover all of his bases, Henry threw a bunch of relics, such as the Mimic and the temporary costumes, into the pizzeria's storage areas, just as a means to complete the job and get everything that Fazzer Frights didn't take care of. This could explain where Fazzer Entertainment got all of the old posters and relics we see in the Pizzaplex. I mean, taking one look at the pizzeria as it's shown in Security Breach, the damage done looks to be caused more by it falling into a sinkhole than it does by fire. I mean, the storage areas in Ruin seem to agree, given they're wooden and not burned to the ground. I think the point here is that while Henry's fire was likely successful in burning the 4 targets in Pizza Sim, the fire was a little bit too contained, and it wasn't able to engulf everything in the building. Speaking of the contained fire, that's also probably what the Burntrap room is to begin with. Cassie calls out the burners in Ruin, and even in Security Breach, it's weird that they were there. It's likely the Burntrap area is just a residual of the vents in Pizza Sim, with the side we see in the base game being partially refurbished. The books say that at one point this pizzeria was supposed to be turned into a museum. Maybe that's true in the games as well, hence why it appears that only some of this ventilation area is habitable, while the other side still has the burners built into it. By the way, this extends to the Mimic's room as well. I know some have claimed that the old-timey monitor and the ancient-looking mascot costumes may be cluing us in that this was an even older building that the FNaF 6 pizzeria just so happened to be built on top of, but given the facts that a Pizzaplex branded forklift got down here, we use the same type of 80s era computer in the parts and service and base game, and the fact that the floor tiling is the same between this area and the area before it, seems to imply that this is simply another part of the same building that had been broken off during the cave-in. As I said though, this video is nowhere near as big as some of my previous ones. I just wanted to do something smaller to give myself a little bit more of a breather compared to last week. Let me know what you think about all that I said in the comments, and I'd be happy to read them. That being said, I'll see you all next time.